calling the Wednesday, September 11th, 2024 Economic Development Commission meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Tonight's Economic Development Commission meeting will be held hybrid for the public using Zoom. Commission members and staff will be participating in this meeting in person. As chair, I'll be leading the Economic Development Commission meeting, and the public is welcome to participate when invited throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting by joining via Zoom at zoom.us/join and typing in meeting ID 859-4361-9859. Once you're logged into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator which item you wish to speak to. You may also call into the meeting at 651-372-8299 and enter meeting ID 859-4361-9859. Now onto the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda. Do any members of the commission have any changes to the agenda? How about any members of staff?
Yes, we do have one addition. With the appointment of Vicki Anderson as commissioner, we do need to swear her in tonight. So we'll add that to adoption of the agenda.
Great. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda with the added item?
Moved.
All right. Can I get a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstains? All right. Motion is carried. So we will move on to swearing Vicki in.
All right. You could stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Vicki Anderson, do solemnly swear
I, Vicki Anderson, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Minnesota,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Minnesota,
and faithfully will discharge the duties as a member of the Burnsville Economic Development Commission
and faithfully will discharge the duties as a member of the Burnsville Economic Development Commission
of the city of Burnsville in the county of Dakota and state of Minnesota,
of the city of Burnsville in the county of Dakota and state of Minnesota,
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability,
So help me God.
so help me God.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Welcome, Vicki. Okay, so we're going to move on to the approval of the May 8th, 2024 Economic Development Commission meeting minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? No.
No changes.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the
I
minutes?
will make that motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Abstained? Okay, motion is carried. Let's move on to our strategic framework discussion. That's going to be presented by Beth Weber, our economic development specialist.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for being here tonight. We have a lot of good stuff to go over, and I'm excited to hear your feedback throughout this process. So as a reminder, we are going through an economic development strategic framework update, or just kind of a new plan altogether. Our final product will be the result of data, community input, and peer city initiatives. So tonight you'll receive a summary of what we're learning about the economy and our market conditions, a summary of our community engagement to date, and some of that process and what we've learned through surveys, open houses, and some stakeholder interviews. And then we'll review the peer city information that has been gathered specifically in regards to their economic development work. So looking at some community trends, this is just some information about Burnsville. We have just over 65,000 residents, and you can see that in comparison to the Twin Cities as a whole. And then just some information on our demographics, income, homeownership, and just our growth overall as it compares to the Twin Cities. Some additional information regarding that. Burnsville's population is aging, and our household size has dropped at a faster rate than other communities. We've added substantial multifamily housing in the past decade to help stabilize the growing rents that everyone has seen, and home value growth continues upward as supply remains limited. And there is somewhat of a missing middle housing demand for townhomes and condominiums. As it relates to economic drivers, job growth is strongest in lower wage service industries and middle income healthcare, and we'll learn more about that in future slides. And then as more lower wage service workers commute from outside the city, whereas many who live in Burnsville commute out. So these are just some information about our workforce. So you can see the percentage of industries that a lot of people work in. You'll see high levels of healthcare, retail, and manufacturing. There's over 2,600 businesses in Burnsville with just over 37,000 total employees. You'll see transportation, the different ways that people get to and from their place of employment. Typically people drive alone to work, whereas very few people bike, interestingly enough. And then you'll see kind of the breakdown that I mentioned on the last slide in the circle chart on the top right, indicating that people work in Burnsville and live elsewhere, around 29,000. We have about 4,100 people that live and work in Burnsville, and then just over 25,000 that live in Burnsville and work elsewhere. So when we look at our job growth, it's been strongest in the industrial space, particularly in wholesaling and manufacturing. And our medical services, largely focused at the Fairview Ridges complex, continues to be a major employment hub. The wages vary greatly, but there are more family-sustaining jobs available in the medical sector. The largest losses would be through office-based occupations. They're all in a decline metro-wide. Burnsville is no exception. However, let's see, the regional concentration of professional services and engineering do create a buffer. I'm just gonna pause this for 1 second. It looks like this was not the right presentation, or something happened. So if we could just bear with me for 1 second. Now it's frozen. So as we've been going through this process, we've been gathering a lot of data and information to kind of help formulate some of the questions that we've been asking of the community, of council, and that we'll ask you tonight. And so while we're waiting, I'll just kind of continue on high level. We have kind of 3 different industrial parks in Burnsville. We have Lark Industrial Park, which is the oldest. The average age of those buildings is from 1982, and they have a vacancy rate of only 3.2%. We have our river quadrant, which would kind of be the northwest corner of Burnsville. Those are very prime and in demand for logistics, manufacturing, and wholesale. Private sector redevelopment is occurring, and we've seen that in the development of some of the land along Lady Bird with the 2 industrial buildings that are there now. And demand is still very strong for industrial space there. The third industrial park is along South Cross, just south of County Road 42 on the western side of the city. And that contains mixed industrial, office, retail, sports uses. You'll also note that it's home to Collins Aerospace Manufacturing. Office and corporate are performing well, but there's kind of creep in from alternative uses. Just as a whole for Burnsville, and our industrial buildings are older, smaller. They have lower ceiling heights and fewer dock bays than newer inventory in the metro. But it does remain an excellent location with strong demand for smaller space, for small to mid-size businesses. And there's selectively redeveloping industrial space is important for the job space. So we're just gonna have to go with what we have here. It is not cooperating. All right. So when we look at office vacancy rates relative to the Twin Cities, you can see that our office vacancy rates are much lower than the Twin Cities as a whole. A lot of this has to do with the pandemic, decline in office use in general, and Burnsville's mixed-use centers have many desired amenities for office users. However, kind of the full shakeout is still taking place. Older office buildings, such as those north and south of our heart of the city area, are likely to be redeveloped. Some of that is already occurring, and new investment into areas like Burnsville Center is still likely some years out. And so you'll see the office vacancy rates in kind of 4 distinct locations of Burnsville that house our commercial areas. Retail vacancy rates. Outside of fast casual restaurant concepts, Burnsville has added no new retail space in the past decade. No new space, when combined with the difficulty in finding workforce labor, has led to falling employment in that sector, both in food accommodation and in retail. Retail developers halted new development due to e-commerce in the 2010s. Absorption has stabilized, leading to new development, higher acquisition rates, and redevelopment as well. And although occupancy rates in Burnsville are higher than the Twin Cities, a lot of this is driven by vacancy at the mall and some larger vacancies due to redevelopment in neighborhood centers. But redevelopment does indicate that there are continued market driven opportunities rather than a decline. So here you'll see just some information on our rent to monthly income. Rents in Burnsville have been growing faster than in comparison cities. We've added a lot of new market rate housing, and so that's something to keep in mind. The ratio of housing cost burden renters is rising faster in Burnsville than in many competing locations. Finding and retaining labor remains difficult for businesses, and workforce housing near places of employment could help to ensure adequate labor supply.
I have a question.
Yes.
The monthly income, is that median or is that the literal renters?
I apologize, I'm not sure. I believe it's median, but I'm not 100% certain.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Related to that, senior housing is needed, and the demand for it is very strong. There has been new senior housing that has been added, both affordable and active adult housing typologies. This does help drive the turnover for single family homes, but it could be to the trade-off of workforce housing. So as we think about community engagement and the things that have been accomplished thus far and where we're at currently, phase 1 was the introduction of the strategic framework to stakeholders, and we gathered feedback. Phase 2, we had a community workshop. There was a open house where the public could come and provide feedback. We had a story map online as well as a survey. You'll see that we're in phase 3, where we will be conducting stakeholder and focus group sessions. We would consider tonight's meeting in that category. And this is going to allow us to gain deeper insight into what you'll see later as our draft objectives. Also included in phase 3 will be an updated story map on our website, as well as an online survey that we're still developing. And then finally in phase 4, we will have another community workshop, open house, where we will share a more finalized version of the draft framework to collect input on those results and objectives, with the addition of a story map and survey at that time as well. So things that we've learned through conversations with stakeholders, through the online survey, through conversations with community members, people feel that the cost of living is reasonable in Burnsville. So despite the high rents that we saw in a previous slide, people do still feel that Burnsville is an affordable place to live. They view our support for manufacturing as a positive, as well as our parks and recreation opportunities. And then you'll see a variety of additional investment opportunities, whether it be infrastructure improvements, commercial amenities, support for businesses, attracting high-wage jobs, Burnsville Center, and then different sustainability.
What is the definition of new economy here? New economy, high-wage jobs?
So those would be typically in the technology field and the medical field, creating opportunities like that. I didn't include that in this PowerPoint, I apologize. But yes, typically it would be more jobs that require a higher level of education. Some concerns that people communicated to us were concerns about traffic, vacant retail space, schools, quality and cost of housing, and then supporting an aging population. So as I stated before, both the data and the information that we receive from community surveys and input is how we have come to bring forward our draft objectives. Also part of that was a peer city review, thinking about what our neighbors are doing and how we can remain competitive in the Twin Cities market, and how we can attract and retain businesses, new residents, and things like that. And so you'll see Brooklyn Park has TIF districts, they've had public-private partnerships, business retention programs. St. Louis Park has used a lot of grants, they've done redevelopment projects and community engagement efforts, and then Bloomington has job creation programs and place creation projects. Place creation is sometimes also known as placemaking. So that can be creating spaces where your community members or the public can gather and make it a more enjoyable experience. Examples of that we've done in Burnsville would be the painted jersey barriers that are kept in heart of the city. We've had ice sculpture at one of our winter events, and then we've had chalk artists make art at a different event. So those are just some examples that Burnsville has done.
The infrastructure improvements that they were saying, so the infrastructure development and infrastructure improvements, are those like what was put in the other slide, like walkability and biking, or is it other infrastructure?
It could be all of that, yes. Okay. Trails, biking, road improvements, making it more pedestrian friendly. It could be a broad range of infrastructure. And then we have two other communities, Coon Rapids and Egan, kind of similar themes among all of them, with the communities primarily focusing on job creation, business retention, with significant emphasis on leveraging public-private partnerships and then state and federal grants for economic growth. So now we'll move on to our draft objectives. Objective 1, these aren't in any ranked order of priority. That's just the number. So the first one is fostering small business growth. So the rationale behind this objective would be that small businesses contribute significantly to job creation and economic resilience, and Burnsville's commercial spaces are ideally suited for supporting new and growing firms. And so I guess maybe I'll ask your preference, there are 6 objectives. Would we like to go through all 6 and then circle back for discussion on some or all of them, or would we like to pause for discussion after each one? Is there a preference?
Can we see all 6 first?
Yes, absolutely. So objective 2 is preserve and enhance industrial spaces. The rationale behind this is that there's a strong demand that exists for industrial space, particularly for non-traditional manufacturing or wholesale operations. Objective 3 would be align infrastructure plans with development and redevelopment opportunities. So our existing transportation and capital improvement plans effectively address the city's current needs. However, there could be a need to align these projects for future redevelopment opportunities to ensure connectivity and modern infrastructure. It's essential for facilitating business operations and supporting future expansion. Objective 4 would be developing a skilled workforce and housing. So the rationale behind this would be collaboration with educational institutions and the provision of affordable, high-quality housing being essential for workforce development. 5 is strengthening economic development partnerships. So this would be collaboration between the city, the chamber, regional entities, and other community partners that can drive broader economic impact. And then finally, objective 6, promoting health, wellness, and aging in place. So Burnsville is a regional medical gateway, and it's undergoing a demographic transition, as I mentioned in a previous slide, with our aging population. So there could be a need to develop health and wellness typologies. So those are the 6 objectives, and at this point, I would be looking for feedback and commentary on perhaps what objectives resonate most with you all, what you like or dislike, and then secondly, what strategies that you could see or would like to see as part of the final objectives. And I would just remind that these are draft objectives, and our further community engagement could come back aligning different objectives. Also should note that we probably won't end up with 6, and so we don't need to be stuck on that number. It would likely be less than 6. And so, yes, really looking for your feedback and what resonates with you all.
Can you shift to objective 2?
Yes.
Nope, 3.
Yep.
Do you happen to have a slide with all of them on one slide?
I don't,
Oh,
no,
okay.
because the font would have gotten too small.
Okay, this was the one that I had like a thought for, which was, so the objective is align infrastructure plans with development and redevelopment opportunities. And like the first thing that, I guess what's been stuck in my head as we've been going through this is like the walkability and biking, because like I love biking, but it's not very, bikeable. So it wouldn't usually occur to me to like take my bike to the store or something. But it was occurring to me as we, are potentially redeveloping maybe like apartment complexes or something, and maybe there's like walkability and bikeable paths that are going by those apartment complexes, that it would be something where if you look at Minneapolis, that's a really bikeable city. A lot of those apartment complexes will have like bike storage rooms in the apartments so that those folks can leverage their spot next to the bike path and use it. So that was how I was thinking of aligning those two things as my brain was kind of following along.
Excellent. As a note, with all of the new apartment development that we have had, bike parking is typically an amenity that is offered. But again, that would be most typically for our new buildings.
Like indoor?
Typically a lot of times in the lower level garages, near parking.
Can you flip back to that first objective again?
Yes.
So when you're, this foster small business growth, which is such a good driver of both jobs and quality of life and all the other things. So what, I guess, what does that look like? How would this be different from what we're doing currently? Or is this just an extension of what we're doing currently?
It could be both. So a lot of times with city functions, it can feel like a checklist, and there's a lot of times a finish line. And from my perspective, there isn't a finish line in economic development. We're always striving to do more, striving to do better. And a lot of times our themes can look similar or can have a similar end result, but how we get there could look different. And that's where we're at in this point in time, looking for what would fostering small business growth look like to you. Would that be providing small business grants? Would that be providing like a facade update, program for a commercial building? And so this is where we're able to really gather feedback from you all, from the community, from our stakeholders to see what that does look like to you, because ultimately this is the Burnsville community's plan. This isn't solely my plan or staff's plan. This is to be community and data and, peer city driven. so that we can remain competitive and continue to grow Burnsville economically.
And so you led right into my next one. So out of those peer cities, are there any that have done, a growth in the number or the size of new businesses that they've launched within their communities? Have they done any programs that have been successful that we would want to emulate, or has that still been something that everybody's still trying to figure out how to make it work?
I'm not sure if our conversations through our consultant went into that level of detail,
Okay.
and if that data from their prospective cities was provided to us.
Okay.
But certainly a good question to see if we have access to that on the success of other people's programs.
Have we done any research or outreach to find out from this, residents of the city, what sort of appetite there is for different types of small businesses that are maybe missing? I guess my thought behind it is that if we know what sort of small businesses people would be looking for or wanting to use in the community, we can use that information. It can be public information, and then folks who are thinking about starting a business or moving their business have that sort of research already available that we can give them that says, yes, this is something that people in Burnsville want to have here, just as an idea for folks who are on the fence about investing or where they want to invest their business.
Certainly, that is excellent feedback and something I can bring back to our consultants to see if that would make sense as a survey question, to have it be multiple choice or open-ended, to help gather that information.
Do you have information about the developable or unused land in the city?
Well, Burnsville, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but somewhere between 95 and 98% developed, so there is very little vacant land left. So Burnsville is in a phase of what we would call redevelopment, and that's completely driven, or typically driven privately.
Yep.
And so from the city's standpoint, certainly supportive of redevelopment and helping facilitate that, whether it be through grants, which we've applied for and received, or other sort of assistance that could be available in kind of removing barriers, whether it be rezoning a property or what the case might be.
And I read in the news that the city, I think, condemned a property in the north part of town that was a safety risk. Are there many other properties like that in the city that that the city is maybe considering action to, or might need to? Because if we're at like 98% developed, then short of new land opening somewhere, I don't know. There's not a whole lot we can do with aside from redeveloping, like you've mentioned.
Correct. No, it's I'll say a rare occurrence that it rises to the level of requiring city council action for property condemnation. Certainly not where we would want it to end up, but ultimately it was, for this particular property, for the safety of everyone. It's a rare occurrence. I think we've had maybe 2 since I've been here.
Do we know what is the main driver for people to come into Burnsville to start a small business?
Location is typically the comment that I hear most, given our proximity to several of the major freeways. And I have been told that our rents are perhaps more affordable, sometimes maybe due to the age of the stock available, but typically it's location.
So, and I'm kind of taken on to what he thinks, it's the same corollary. One of the things that may be worthwhile for us to explore as you're going through this is to survey the existing small manufacturing and small wholesale businesses, which we have tons of them. I live not far from the South Cross corridor, and there is an amazing number of just small businesses that are thriving back there. But to reach out to them and survey them to find out who are there, do they have suppliers or people that they, their conduit, they're plugged into all kinds of different people within their respective industries, and what of those people could be beneficial to bring in closer to them, or maybe interested in, if they're a major supplier, being closer to their primary, end user or whatever.
Excellent feedback. And something to note on a smaller scale that we do, I go on Grow Minnesota visits in partnership with the Burnsville Chamber. And among the questions that we will ask business owners at that time is, how's your space working for you? Do you need more or less? Are you looking to leave? If you are, let's help you find you space to stay. And then the other question that I always ask is, if there was something in Burnsville that's missing that would make your life easier as a business owner, what might that be?
Right.
And whether it's a specific type of storage or a certain industry trade that might be of assistance. So those are questions that we certainly ask on a smaller scale at each of those visits.
Perfect.
I think that objective 5, strengthen economic development partnerships, I don't think that that's a good objective. I've been very impressed, Beth, with what you have communicated with all the partnerships that we have, but I think that's more of a strategy, less an outcome that we're trying to seek on to its own end. But I it sounds like every time we get an update, I hear truly about all the ways that the city and the chamber and other partners are coming together. I'm sure we could always improve it, but I don't necessarily think it needs to be a standalone objective, more something that it sounds like we're already doing and we should just kind of keep doing, and is probably a strategy to a few of these other objectives.
Certainly.
Beth, could you go to objective 6, please?
Yes.
You mentioned a couple of times the kind of reality of the percentage of our residents that are above the age of 65. And I think this is a really important objective to hone in on, specifically going back to that heat map where we were looking at rent to monthly incomes, a higher level of seniors living in our community that could maybe provide some context to that heat mapping, especially with the being on fixed incomes and dealing with higher rents that have been increasing, especially with this inflationary period that we've been in over the past couple of years. But I think this is just a really key objective to hone in on. From a broader perspective, health, wellness, but we've been talking about aging housing stock. So I think this is one of our key objectives to really highlight going forward. My second question for you is, when we look at the comparable cities, Coon Rapids, Brooklyn Park, when our consultants came and presented to us, it was kind of really hard to decipher, without really kind of diving into the nitty-gritty details of those particular cities, which ones are really comparable to us with the characteristics that we have.
Sure.
And, like my colleagues were saying, I think it would be really impactful to have some greater detail about some of those strategies, especially redevelopment strategies that have been done, just so we can kind of have a, apples to apples comparison, because certainly we're not the only city that's, upwards of 90%, of our land is developed, looking at some kind of comparable strategies that have been done, kind of honing in, I think will be really impactful. And I think we should really kind of reach out to Stantec and our consultants to kind of get some more of that information that they may already have, but they haven't necessarily disseminated to the commission.
Right.
One of the things I really appreciate about living in Burnsville, like for example, we just had the fire muster, and so it was awesome to come here to the Civic Center Park and then to be at the Ames Center on Thursday, and in the heart of the city. And it's just an inviting space, and that's something that drives me and my wife and family to come out and invite our family. So I love the things that the city does to show up and always be represented at that. I think those are great things. Looking through these lists of objectives, I think the first 3 objectives, fostering small business growth, preserve and enhance industrial space, and align infrastructure plans, those seem to be really in the wheelhouse of what the city could do. I think that developing a skilled workforce, we're not a community college, and while we could be a connection point between, say, a community college or a trade school, and things in the community, I know that those colleges have those types of programs already. And then, promoting health, wellness, and aging in place, I'm not really sure what the city could do with that. It's not that it's not a good objective, but I just don't know if it's really in the wheelhouse of the city. I don't know how we would promote health, wellness, and aging in place. Although the thing that maybe comes the closest is when I think about the aging in place. If Burnsville is the type of community where you don't have to leave when you're 65 because there's nothing to do that you want to do, and there's no spaces to be. But I think we have really great parks, and the events that we do. So I think those are, I feel like the city's on the right track there. But I think that maybe focusing on, from my perspective, focusing on the first three objectives seem like they might fit more what the city is in a spot to do.
I think objective 6 fits in as like an addition to some of the other objectives, because if you look at like promoting small business growth, then there's again that opportunity to invite sorts of small businesses that our folks who are aging in place could utilize. And then if you look at infrastructure and, potentially people who are aging in place are going to need infrastructure that's walkable and things like that. So there are ways that we're still getting at this objective, maybe that it's not its own, but that we always, have it as like a top of mind in looking at any of the other objectives, just knowing that this is such a large portion of our population.
I think it's important to use this as a lens when we look at any of the other objectives that we're working on. So to your point, this can buttress all of those things and should be a consideration of it. And it's interesting, as we were talking about peer cities, Bloomington was in, but Richfield was not. And I think Richfield is probably similar to Burnsville in that it was an aging population. And I feel like they've done a lot of things recently too that have done kind of to address this aging in place, and they've started to kind of turn over, and they're getting a much younger population to live there because, again, it is affordable. It's it's accessible. It's a lot of the things that we have. We're just a little bit, we're one click down the road. So I think that it's important for us to not disregard this, but it just needs to be something that we look at as how, when we work through the other objectives, does it align with one of these, and how can we help incorporate that into it? Does that make sense?
Certainly.
I think aging in place certainly comes into play when you're talking about just housing affordability, especially for fixed income seniors. I mean, you mentioned the recent, Life Tech property, the low income housing tax credit senior property that was open here in Burnsville. So where we're talking about health and wellness, certainly, seniors that are consistently stressed about how they're going to make their monthly rent payments that are, increasing is something that, contributes to their quality of life. So I agree, kind of building this and budgeting this under kind of other priorities, but specifically, housing affordability, but also, how, having seniors be able to have a communal place that they can call their own, and what that does to other housing stock options. It's all kind of a cyclical thing where we're trying to meet everyone's needs. But I certainly think that we should certainly still focus on it, again, because we have seniors that we really want to, want them to know that they are a priority for the city, that we're meeting their needs effectively.
And, Burnsville has, from my experience growing up in Burnsville, my parents, were in a single-family home, and then they transitioned to a townhouse in Burnsville. And then they transitioned from the townhouse to an age-restricted cooperative housing. And then, of course, they transitioned to the elder care or assisted living facility in Burnsville. So Burnsville's got all of that. So you can go from, being a young family in a single family home all the way to an assisted living facility in your senior years without ever leaving the city of Burnsville.
Thank you.
Can we touch on the skilled labor one again? I think someone had mentioned that didn't seem like it was something for the city, but I think that what you had mentioned as skilled before was more white collar and highly educated, or is this more skilled in terms of trades and labors, and tell me what this looks like, I guess, is kind of where we're going.
Skilled workforce being more broad. The new high wage economy jobs were kind of the more technology or medical base that potentially require a higher level of education. But in terms of this objective, thinking about developing a workforce that could potentially live and work in Burnsville if the housing was available to them.
So I was kind of confused by that as well. you weren't talking about attracting a skilled workforce to work here. You're talking about combining the two. When we see the data shows that the majority of people who live here don't work here.
Correct.
Right, okay. I tend to agree with my colleagues who, who have pointed out 1, 2, and 3 are the key objectives here.
Beth, do you know if, I think it's the zoning, there's a planning commission, right? And they were looking at the zoning rules. Have they finished their review where they were considering, I know a couple of years ago, they were thinking, what might it look like if the city changed some of the zoning restrictions and made multifamily housing more available for development? Do you know if that commission has finished that work?
The planning commission has not completed the zoning code update.
Okay.
So that is still a work in progress and on their work plan in conjunction with our planning department staff.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Where does the city stand in terms of utilization of vacancy rates in the new apartment buildings that have been built? Are most of those, rented
My understanding is they fill up quickly.
pretty quickly? Okay.
Yes.
Market rate and affordable.
Both, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and if they've got HUD financing, they have to pre-sell like 90% or
Right.
95% to get the HUD financing.
So I guess I'll pose another question. In hearing that the majority of you resonate mostly with objectives 1 through 3, and view perhaps 4 through 6 as important, but perhaps subcategories or sub-strategies, are there any objectives that you feel have been missed or overlooked or would deserve in themselves to be its own objective rather than a sub-strategy?
I think something that stands out to me, well, maybe I'll pose this question. Do we know how hard it is to open and maintain businesses in Burnsville? And like, for example, when I served on the code review task force, one of the things we looked at in particular were the alcohol licenses and the restrictions where I think it was, you had to have a 3/4 mile radius between anything unless you were over by Costco. And that's a barrier to entry for a liquor store. And are there other, have we taken a look at other regulations or surveyed the people that are in Burnsville about, are there places where Burnsville is in the way of, I will posit that Burnsville is in the way of any new liquor stores. Now, maybe we're not trying to, build a strong economy on liquor stores, and that's okay. But are there other places like that where we have regulation that is making it less accessible for business owners to come and set up in Burnsville?
I would cautiously say not that I'm aware of. A lot of the licensing, many of those rules come down from the state. And so the distance requirement, I'm not aware of.
That's a city one, yeah.
Right, but I'm not aware of other types of businesses that would have a distance requirement. Requirements perhaps relating to restaurant or food type businesses where if they're close to residential, we require an odor buffer. Perhaps that could be cost prohibitive, but on that same note, it could be unnecessarily disruptive to neighboring properties if we didn't require that. And so the shorter answer is I'm not aware of, nor have I heard of a lot of barriers of businesses saying, gosh, this just isn't going to work out for me because of X, Y, Z. Good feedback and something to be mindful of. On a related note, perhaps, the resources that we do provide to businesses, in my opinion, are really excellent. Access to Open to Business, which is the free confidential entrepreneurship support for people who have an existing business, want to open a business. They have unlimited hours of free resources and advice. Other resources, certainly the library, SCORE, I'm probably missing some, which is problematic, but there are a lot of resources that business owners or prospective business owners do have access to. And so I think that is something that we should be proud of, certainly while still being mindful of not being a barrier when we're, looking at a business.
As far as the toolkit that's available to the city, can you help me see if I'm missing anything? There's regulate, deregulate, there's tax or give someone money, and then there's provide the resources and the connectors. That's basically the playbook that the city has the authority to use. Is that, am I missing anything there?
No.
I mean, it's not like the council's gonna open their own business and, we're gonna start having, Burnsville city retail space in
Right.
particular, so, okay.
Right.
I was just gonna add to, Andrew, you were talking about liquor stores. As I recall, the city, whenever years ago, said that there could only be one liquor store per 5,000 people population. And, because I remember when Total Wine wanted to come into the city of Burnsville, they couldn't because they were already maxed out on liquor licenses, and they bought out that liquor store on Cliff Road across from State Farm. That's now a Subway, right? And that's how they got the liquor license for Total Wine. So I think that's, yeah, you could get another liquor store as long as you grow more people.
Sure.
Does the city or does your office record the new businesses? Do you give a report like that, new businesses that are created, the types of businesses, to the city council or to anyone else?
Certainly. So the city of Burnsville does not require a general business license. So in that respect, there is a bit of a barrier where a new business comes in, perhaps they occupy an existing office space, they don't need any permits, and they're able to occupy it, and we don't know, which is unfortunate. In the case that they do need a permit or some sort of license, we do pull reports from our systems, and I include as many new businesses as I'm able to gather and find in each of our printed bulletins that go out to community members 4 times a year, I believe. So that's on kind of in my economic development section. And then certainly when we celebrate with ribbon cuttings or anniversary celebrations with businesses, then we're able to recognize them in the bulletin as well. But unfortunately, without a general business license, there isn't
Hard
a
to keep
mechanism
track
for
of
us
it,
to capture everybody. Good question, though.
Beth, at our March meeting, we had a representative from MCCD
Yes.
come and get an overview of the Open to Business program.
Yep.
Just wondering, are there any other kind of comparable programs that, maybe are happening? I know that one specifically, the city of Burnsville does some cost sharing
Yes.
with that program, which, hence was the presentation, kind of give us an update of how the program is progressing and succeeding, I might say. But just wondering, are there any kind of other similar programs that might be beneficial for us as a commission to know about? Or even when you all are going out to the community, or what are some of those other programs that you may be recommending to small business owners? Because again, one of the key points about this program is they're providing potentially upfront capital, seed capital, which is just the initial barrier to be able to get a business off the ground. So just curious.
Yes. SCORE, I would say, would be a similar program where they have business advisors to provide support. It's kind of a mentorship program. Off the top of my head, I'm unsure if there's a cost associated with that, but certainly something I can take note of and provide a more comprehensive update on what small business supporter programs are available at a later meeting.
That'd be great.
Excellent.
Does the city have a relationship with the landlords of the commercial spaces in Burnsville? It's like, is there any type of an organization or some type of a, because I know you make available a map showing what spaces are available, but I'm just wondering if there's any type of relationship with the actual owners of those buildings or the property managers.
Sure. not an official one at this point, and the property map that you referenced is certainly not a comprehensive list. So we have local brokers that will submit the properties that they have available, and we update that map. But again, it's not an exhaustive list. We kind of do the best we can with that, with the submissions that we receive. But at present, there's not an official network or relationship mechanism with each of the property managers.
There is slightly through the chamber, because a lot of these property owners and property managers are members of the Chamber of Commerce. And so we interact with them, on a fairly often basis through, the chamber ambassadors and the chamber board.
Could you say more about Objective 3, aligning infrastructure plans? What could that look like, or do you have more to say about that in particular?
So the city has existing transportation and capital improvement plans that address our current needs. But being mindful of future needs and how development and redevelopment of property and how that impacts infrastructure, there could be opportunity to have more alignment or synergy with that. And so I would say we've done a good job of thinking about when a property redevelops, say with an apartment building, and there's a sidewalk connection that could be added, that's something that could be taken into consideration. Or if there's a road project and storm sewer or some sort of water line is going to be replaced, keeping that in mind as it relates to potential redevelopment so that it's the right size or something to that effect. So it would, in my thought, it would look like more and continued collaboration between departments to make sure that we all know what each other's doing. So we do have what's called a development review committee, where a representative from each department meets every other week about all of the current and upcoming developments so that we can all kind of stay updated on the same page. And this objective, could kind of fall into that category as well, to just make sure that we're all talking and aware of what could happen or will happen in the future.
Thank you. Maybe another point of my own education. The main arteries in the city are, for the most part, county roads, and so we don't have authority over them really, right? We have the ability to partner with Dakota County, but it's their road, right?
Correct.
So people say, hey, 42 is too slow. Well, Burnsville agrees, but that's about it.
Yes.
Okay.
But to your earlier comment about anything that is missing, and this is probably organic within these, but the only word that I feel like is missing in here is recruitment. There's a lot about development and new businesses, but is there a recruitment strategy that ties into any of these? Or is that just an assumption that is part of how you get your objectives done?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's an assumption, but recruitment is definitely something that we could be mindful of and including and seeing how and what that would look like as we develop the objectives.
Do we have any more on the strategic framework discussion?
We do not. So I guess I would just close with kind of as we continue working through this process, the next phase of community engagement will develop the strategies more and will develop more of the action steps for each objective. I know I've taken notes tonight, Kevin's taken notes tonight, but ultimately these deliverables will guide the city on goal prioritization, drafting of policies, allocation of resources, and ultimately the performance metrics for what will be the final economic development strategic framework. So we'll just look quickly at kind of our next steps. Community engagement will continue, one-on-one engagement with stakeholder groups, including the Chamber of Commerce and Experience Burnsville, which is our Convention and Visitors Bureau, and then finalizing the objectives and giving a presentation to council at the very end. So as I mentioned previously, our soonest upcoming engagement will include an updated story map on our website, a new online survey, and then again, that stakeholder engagement. So that concludes this agenda item, unless there are any further comments, questions, or feedback.
What was your final target date for presentation to the council? I think that was on the earlier slide that you had, but I don't remember what it was. You can guess. 3 months, 6 months?
Is it spring?
Around the end of the year.
Okay.
So, let me just go back on that. You haven't started any of the community workshops yet, right? We're in that phase now.
Well, so we did one set of community engagement with the survey and the story map and the open house that we had here at City Hall, and then we'll be doing another round of that. So more information on that will come out, and we will make sure that we publicize that and communicate that to you as commissioners as well, because that will be an additional opportunity for you all to kind of have another check-in with us.
And are you getting a good response on the online and vice versa with the in-person type of meetings?
We are, yeah. The in-person, it's always tricky with
Right.
people wanting to come to an open house and talk about economic development. We did have good survey participation, and I attended several of the city events over the summer to kind of push that and tell the story and ask people for their opinions on that. And so we'll look for ways to further engage and include that for public response as well.
All right, so our next agenda item is the sale and rental of city property policy, which is also presented by Beth.
All right, the city has a land sale policy. Most recently, it was amended in 2018. It applies to both personal and real estate owned by the city and the EDA. And City Council recently approved some changes to kind of streamline the process, make it more clear for city staff and more clear for potential purchasers of land that we have for sale. And so the steps now include a pre-sale due diligence, solicitation of offers, and then purchase and development agreement. And so when we look at pre-sale due diligence, that could be completing an appraisal, a survey of the land, environmental assessments like a phase 1 or a phase 2, and then title investigation. As part of this, we would develop a sales and development objective, and then the council or the EDA, depending on who the owner of the land is, would authorize the issuance of that solicitation of offers. And then information that would be included in the solicitation of offer could include a description of the site, what our development priorities or what the end use of the land that we're looking for is, the submission requirements, evaluation criteria, and a schedule. We would keep that open for a minimum of 30 days. We would have it on our city website, a sign would be posted on the property, and then in all likelihood, we would also publish it in the local newspaper as well as a public notice. Following the solicitation submittals, we would review and rank those, and then council or EDA would review and approve a letter of intent with a selected buyer. Purchase and development, we would negotiate a purchase and development agreement. For city property, not owned by the EDA, Planning Commission would review the land sale for consistency with our comprehensive plan, and then the council would approve the purchase and development agreement. And then for property owned by the EDA or our Economic Development Authority, there would be a public hearing and approval of the purchase and development agreement. So a couple things to note. If no offers were received during the initial solicitation period, we could have the option to leave it open for an indefinite amount of time. And then just for additional clarity, this was approved at the July 16th council meeting. So for some of the land that we do have currently listed for sale, we're in the process of getting updated or new appraisals, most specifically for the land that we own on the corner of South Cross and Portland, as well as the former Fire Station 1 land located kind of near Kohl's and Costco. So once those are ready for solicitation, we would begin the process with our remaining 2 pieces of land that we own near County Road 5 and Highway 13. So the majority of the land owned by the city is owned by the city and not the Economic Development Authority, just to note that.
I'm sorry, is any of it, is it all residential or what zoning are they?
So the land at County Road 5 and Highway 13 is zoned for business. So the parcel south of Highway 13 is zone B3, general business, I believe. And then the parcel on the north side of Highway 13 is zone B4, which is highway commercial. And then the parcel at South Cross and Portland is zoned R2, which is residential. So this was just an update on a recent change by council that I felt was relevant to update you all on. And unless we have any questions, we can move on to our final item. Let's do it. All right. So this is our strategic plan update on our existing economic development strategic plan goals. So we will keep with the theme of that. So our existing goal is ensuring the sustainability of the Burnsville Shopping Center and County Road 42 corridor. You'll see a photo of the Cafe Zupa's ribbon cutting that we just had not that long ago. And then Element Indoor Golf is under construction. That's going to be located in the retail center near where the former Buca's used to be. And then Skateropolis, which has an indoor skate park in the mall, recently acquired an outdoor ramp, and they have placed that outside their space at the Burnsville Center. And so that is open and ready for people to use. And then finally, Best Buy has closed temporarily because they will be moving to the new space being built for them at the Cub Foods County Road 42 redevelopment. And Bob's Discount Furniture is in for permit to move into the former Best Buy space. All right. Improving this image of the school district and the city. So we were pleased to attend the State of the City address that was hosted by the Burnsville and Savage Chambers of Commerce in partnership with School District 191. At the event, we were provided with an overview of the district's progress and strategic initiatives. They talked about some recent survey results, access to technology, and then the Pathways program with some really impactful student stories on their success with that. And then the Business Education Network's local business partnership opportunities as well. And then we also hosted, as a city, teachers from the Burnsville School District as part of the Burnsville Teacher Externship Program. So teachers were able to come in and talk with city staff to gather information that can help their students plan for the future, to understand what it might look like if they wanted to work for local government such as the city of Burnsville. So I hosted the table for community development, which is the overall department that I'm in. So I was able to highlight the range of careers that someone could choose if they wanted to work within community development. I talked about several example projects that we've all worked on recently, and then the variety of the work environment that community development staff has, whether you are primarily office-based, if you're a field staff doing inspections, and what that might look like. And then additionally, we did participate in Night 2 Night. 70 staff attended more than 125 parties. And so you'll see kind of a fun picture of one of our police officers showing off their vehicle to a young person in the community. Continuing development within heart of the city. So you'll see a rendering of Rohr's Company's 170 unit apartment building on the top photo there. And then MWF Properties 48 unit apartment building on the Diamond Head Education site. Rendering is down below. And then additionally in for review right now is Burnsville Holdings LLC for a coffee shop proposal at the former Chinese Gourmet on Burnsville Parkway in Aldrich. So they are working through their plat process right now, and we've kind of learned recently that they are proposing even more improvements to the site, and so review on that will continue separately.
Are they gonna use the existing building or put a new one there?
I think that will be
I don't think
part
so,
of the
'cause we would-
future review.
Okay.
That is not immediately clear to me.
Chinese themed coffee.
Right?
They haven't submitted the proposal yet then.
So they've withdrawn their portion as it relates to the building, but they are continuing with the plat of the property, and so they'll have to reapply for the altered site improvements that they're working through now.
Basically, they're looking to do major facade updates to the building, but it would transform the site drastically, adding in drive-through lanes and different things like that. So they have to go through the whole planning process to evaluate the site.
Is there any, so like if we put like a drive-through or something in that particular spot, is there any thing that the city would consider doing with that intersection at Burnsville Parkway and Aldrich? Because it's already a really odd,
It's a tricky,
it's a already a really
it's
odd
very tricky.
intersection, and then if we add all the additional traffic of like a drive-through,
plus you have the entrance to the freeway there.
yeah. I live right there, and I'm annoyed by it every single day. So then you're scaring me with a drive-through,
Yeah,
honestly.
definitely. That's part of the whole development review. Our engineering department is taking a look at that, and as part of the plat, they're kind of looking at that, as well as looking at different signage we can put to make that one exit entrance area that's really close to the intersection. They're looking at having that be signed as an exit only from the drive-through at this point, so that is something that we're considering.
All right. Goal 4, enhance and build awareness around the city's existing housing and commercial programs and develop new programs as appropriate. So we've talked a couple times about open to business tonight, and through Q2, 20 businesses and 11 residents have been served. So that's very impactful to our community. And then Stantec continues work on the new economic development strategic framework. So that priority falls under the community vibrancy section of our strategic priorities, which is that Burnsville is committed to creating energy that continues to bring our community to life for years to come. Continuing the city's position as a regional destination, I was able to attend the EDAM, Economic Development Association of Minnesota's summer conference in St. Cloud. So that 2-day event allows economic development professionals to create connections and share ideas. We're also able to attend educational sessions. So some of the ones that I attended included affordable housing, workforce development, economic inclusion efforts, development financing, and then finally a legislative session update from Matt Verilek, the Commissioner of Minnesota DEED. And then we also attended the Southeast Metro Development Summit, which was hosted by the Minnesota Real Estate Journal. And this event brought together community partners from Dakota and Washington counties to talk about development in our cities. And the topics this year included Southeast Metro market update, multifamily and residential opportunities in the Southeast Metro, infrastructure and development updates, as well as how to incorporate great experiences into development. And then you'll see that we've had several ribbon cuttings since we last met, with a photo of Steak and Ale, which I know that everyone is very excited about. But we also celebrated with Toka Soccer, Horizon Heights Townhomes, Print and Frame, Cafe Zupas, and most recently Seven Hills Preparatory Academy, which is located off of South Cross and County Road 42. And then finally, updates. As always, reach out with questions. Keep an eye out for our upcoming engagement opportunities. And then our next meeting will be November 13th.
Any other comments? Anyone?
I just want to applaud city staff, but also our city council for was really evident even looking at the ribbon cuttings, is there's a real diversification of businesses, especially, you know, Seven Hills Preparatory Academy. Having a charter school open in Burnsville is just extremely good to see, especially from just diversification, but just attracting, you know, families to Burnsville as well. So just want to applaud the city staff, but also just our city council for really creating a open environment for businesses. Even my colleague was saying, even looking at the code review task force, taking a really proactive approach to looking at how we can invite more businesses into the community. This is just great work. It's great to see.
Thank you.
All right, well, I would like to request a motion for adjournment of the September 11th, 2024 Economic Development Commission meeting.
So moved.
So second, sorry.
Great. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays, abstain?
No naysayers.
The motion is carried.